Thanks everybody for being here. This has been a really productive week, and we're honored to be presenting in front of all of you. Tom and I are going to present on the Kotzebue, Alaska microgrid. Let's see here. It's a Kotzebue clean energy microgrid. It's one of the most successful clean energy microgrids in Alaska. And due to its rural Arctic location, it's arguably one of the most important clean energy microgrids in the world due to its history and what it's been able to achieve and the challenges it's gone through. We're going to talk about Kotzebue. We're going to introduce ourselves briefly. We're going to talk about Kotzebue, the village, the people, the community. We're going to talk about the power plant and all the different components that are sustaining that energy community there. We're going to talk about the problem statement, its reliance on diesel. We're going to go over the history, the long history of Kotzebue trying to get off diesel, reducing it, some of the successes, some of the failures, and then what their current operating structure is, how it's structured today, and then what the plans they have in place to ultimately get 100% off diesel. So real quick, my name's Brett Pingree, and I've been developing renewables on the distributed system for 20 years and been coming up to Alaska installing wind turbines here in various communities for nearly 20 years. And here's my co-presenter, Tom. Introduce yourself.
Thank you. Uvla Lotak, as my friends and neighbors in Kotzebue would say, that means good morning in Inupiaq. What we're going to try to do here this morning is try to really drive this home, all the technology and all the theory that we've been talking about this week and all the ideas, and we're going to kind of give you an example of how that worked in our community. And some of you may be behind us in terms of where you're going with renewables. Some of you may be ahead of us, but this is a just good case in point to take a look at. My story is I'm not a great subject matter expert on anything except for Kotzebue. I'm a resident of Kotzebue since 2006. I first came up there to run the local grocery store, and then I worked for the city of Kotzebue for 8 years, the last 2 years as a city manager. During that time, I also sit on the board of directors for the Kotzebue Electric Association, which was my first introduction to energy in a small community. And then, as of April of this year, I have been asked to be the general manager, CEO for the Kotzebue Electric Association. A great honor to serve our community in that way, and a great opportunity for me to tell you the story about what I've learned in Kotzebue since 2006.
Yeah, that's right. You want to tell us about Kotzebue a little bit?
Sure, just a little bit of information about Kotzebue itself. Kotzebue is located above the Arctic Circle. We're 31 miles above the Arctic Circle. We're a remote community. We're an Inupiaq village. The people that live there have been living there for over 10,000 years. And that's something to think about. Those folks are the subject matter experts on how to survive in the Arctic. We're working on a more modern version of how do they continue to survive in the Arctic. They have a community. We have a community of about 3,200 people in Kotzebue. We're in a region, the Northwest Arctic region, of about a little less than 8,000 people that comprises 11 other villages in our region. KEA is an electrical cooperative. It's a utility that provides service to the community of Kotzebue, but we also try to work in a regional aspect with the other 11 villages, and we're proud to say that some of the things that we pioneered in terms of wind energy are now being replicated in all of the 11 villages in the region. The thing you want to realize about Kotzebue is that it has extreme weather conditions, being 31 miles above the Arctic Circle. We only get our fuel deliveries once a year. The native name for Kotzebue is Kikiktagrut. It means almost an island. We are surrounded by water, and that water is frozen for 9 months out of the year. In the 3 months out of the year that the water is not frozen, we're able to bring in our deliveries on barge, and one of those deliveries is fuel. The hard thing about that is we're kind of held hostage to whatever the price of fuel is at that point in time. If it gets delivered once a year and you're locked in at the higher rate, it stays that rate all year long. We have had major climate impacts in our area due to global warming, and that is also affecting us as things get stormier and windier up there. We have more unpredictable weather, so all those things are causing problems in our area. We also have limited infrastructure. Everything that comes into Kotzebue has to be flown in or come in that narrow window per year of 3 months where things can come in on the barge. We are working on a deep water port at the present time. We have a 12-mile access road outside of town to a potential deep water port that we're working on, but that is a ways off in the future yet. So that is a little bit of Kotzebue at a glance.
Yeah, you want to expand on why diesel's so bad up or so challenging to rely on up there?
Well, the economic factors, the pricing, we never know from year to year what the pricing is going to be. In 2021, we were able to lock in a price of under $3 a gallon. Of course, in 2022, everyone paid a higher price for fuel. Our price was just under $4 a gallon. So you've got massive spikes that can happen from year to year, and we're stuck with that until the next year when the fuel deliveries come in. So we have to find a way not to be held hostage to the volatility of diesel prices.
Yeah, and there's lots of handling challenges too when it's barged up. Because of the lack of deep water port. You've got to transfer to a lighter barge, and it gets handled multiple times, so there's presumably risk with spillage and contamination, et cetera, right?
There certainly is, and even we have 2 1-million-gallon tanks that we store the diesel in, and even that is fraught with potential problems in terms of an accident happening with that. So the less you have to rely on diesel, the better.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Alaska is, an independent state, trying to get these communities self-reliant and not subject to events around the world that can destabilize its community. I mean, whether it's the Ukraine war or OPEC, things that communities like Kotzebue have zero control over, but yet it makes such a major impact to the lives of the people there. That's definitely a problem that needs to be solved. So why do we want to get off diesel, right? So we talked about a little bit about having that more predictable cost of energy, especially if it's locally generated and it's clean. Renewables provide a 20-year at least hedge against rising prices. So once you install, whether it's wind or solar, that price of energy is locked in for 20 years. And that is a really strong economic case for using renewable energy. And then there's also a local economic value to that. There are jobs that are created with the adoption of these renewable energies. There's training, technicians, not a lot of jobs, but there are long-term jobs. There's local jobs on the construction side. Whereas when you're buying fuel and getting it barged in, there's none of that money really comes to the community. So trying to keep it, the economics in the community has a long-term positive impact. And obviously, everybody, I believe, gets the fact that, the poles in Alaska are experiencing some of the most significant impacts from climate change. So the people that we talk to, the people that you live with, the Kotzebue community, a lot of the other communities want to make a difference because their lives are being changed with the climate change impacts, the migration patterns that are being disrupted, the sea ice that's declining. Lots of examples to try to make a difference to change. And I think ultimately energy security, having control over your destiny. So if the barge doesn't make it, if the barge doesn't deliver the right amount, if the price does swing wildly, that self-reliance is a big part of America. It's a big part of Alaska, and that's what you guys are trying to address. So Kotzebue has a long, really interesting history of trying to get off diesel. It starts back in 1998 with the help of NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratories, and the Village Power program that existed at that time. There was money provided by the federal government, and in working with Kotzebue and the Village of Wales, and AVEC, the Alaska Village Electric Cooperative, they installed a bunch of nickel-cadmium batteries, a bunch of 50-kilowatt wind turbines, a small rotary converter in the Village of Wales. And that was groundbreaking in the attempt to try to get these diesels, try to offset the amount of diesel that was being consumed, to try to get to diesels off. Very ambitious. It was very successful. The technology of the wind turbines was a little bit unprepared for the rigors of the environment. So that was a major learning lesson. Icing impacts, remote locations for servicing. So that was there were some failures there that was passed along to future wind turbine manufacturers to improve upon. The batteries are still good. They're antiquated, but they still hold a charge and they still discharge, and they're still up there looking for a home. But based on that success, Kotzebue ended up installing, around the same time, more of these 50-kilowatt AOCs from a company in Canada, and one Northern Power 100-kilowatt wind turbine. If you go up to Kotzebue, you can see them. Some of them are still there. Kotzebue is trying to figure out ways how to get them productive again in whatever capacity. And the picture here shows a bunch of those turbines still up there. But again, Kotzebue learned a lot from this process on how to maintain, how to operate, how to integrate with the diesels. It's a challenging. It's the most challenging part, is the integration of whether it's PV or wind in working with the diesels. They're different animals, and they operate differently. There's wild variability of solar and wind. Diesels are really steady, so they started learning a lot about that difficult integration piece. Kotzebue, to their credit, tried adding a flow battery from a company called Premium Power in Boston. Flow batteries, without getting too technical, utilizes water, and that kind of had some successes, but they realized that when it gets 20, 30, 40 below, water-based storage systems, the plumbing froze. Sounds like an obvious thing. They tried to insulate, but there were some learnings there on how to improve the adoption of that technology in cold climates. Undeterred, Kotzebue Electric kept moving forward to try to continue to reduce the amount of diesel. And then in 2017, 2012, Kotzebue added 2 900-kilowatt wind turbines, and those provided really steady wind generation at a very high volume of energy, which was consistently reliable in that environment. And for a number of years, solid 5 years, that steady generation gave Kotzebue the foundation, the confidence that they could expand on a reliable renewable energy generation source. And that's when Kotzebue added a 1 megawatt or 1.2 megawatt hour lithium ion battery from Saft and started really advancing the integration to the next level. Next, based on that continued solid foundation, Kotzebue added a dump load boiler, which is basically a giant a boiler, like a boiler in your house, and that produces hot water when there's extra wind production, which happens in the winter, and the wind produces more energy than the village needs. It produces hot water, which is then delivered to the community hospital, and they have a great demand. They want more of that hot water, so that's been a big success. Kotzebue then added solar, which some people think doesn't make sense in Alaska. Kotzebue's learned otherwise. It makes great sense in the summer, and it helps in the shoulder seasons as well. And solar and wind are actually, it's called negative correlation. They work really well together. Summer is great for solar. The wind is a little less. Wind produces stronger in the winter when the solar's a little less. So they work well together, and that's something that Kotzebue's learned. And then this year, they added another 500 kilowatts of solar. So they're continuing to build off solid foundations and expand their goal to reduce the consumption of diesel. A lot of partnerships that you guys...
One of the things about a village life that you learn is that we all have to depend on each other. Nobody does anything alone. We're a close-knit community and region. We work closely with a number of local and regional partners, Northwest Arctic Borough, the KIC, the Kikiktak Root Inupiaq Corporation. We also worked with other vendors outside of the state. So it's a mix of working together locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. In fact, your company is based out of the Netherlands.
That's right.
So that's a good point right there. So our encouragement to anyone who's a little overwhelmed by this is you don't do it alone. You do it with the partnership of people around you and people outside. And we have found just a wealth of information. Another vendor that we didn't put on this slide here that we've worked with, they help in erecting the wind turbines, is STG. We appreciate their help and support. So none of this happens alone. It's all coordination with other entities that are going to help you along the way.
Yeah, we missed STG's logo on this slide, so they're arguably, you'll see some pictures of the work they did. They did the real hard work here on some of these installations. And also the Alaska Native Renewable Industries installed the solar.
Yes.
So that good local companies in Alaska, yeah, a real village, excuse the pun, to make it all work.
There you go.
So currently, what does this power plant, hybrid power plant, look like? We talked about the PV, a megawatt of PV. We talked about almost 2 megawatts of wind. But the real base of the generation is diesel, and Kotzebue has three 3-megawatt diesel engines. They're basically the same diesel engines that power the trains and the railway that we went on the other night. They have 2 smaller diesels, a 1.5 and a 750 kilowatt, and that's a really interesting strategy that Kotzebue is again leading the way in using different size diesels to accommodate the introduction of clean energy. So when the wind's blowing really high, they can shut off the 3 large diesels and just use a smaller diesel. Therefore, they can utilize all the wind generation and not curtail the wind turbines. Other microgrids that don't have smaller diesels sometimes have to curtail wind, and that's a tragedy because that's all clean energy going out the window, so to speak. This hybrid power plant, the diesel plant, consumes 1.2 million gallons of number 2 diesel per year, and then there is a 5-month reserve, and that's a lot. They pay 45 cents per kilowatt hour. I mean, especially for us in the lower 48, that's crazy. but we understand why, and that's 4 to 5 million per year. Relatively small community spends for energy. Loads are the electrical loads are a lot higher in the winter. The heat, lighting when it's dark, etc. And we talked about the battery, and that really helps. We can talk about this a little more. The battery helps to feather the introduction of the wind and solar into the grid, and then it also helps to, when the wind and solar drops, because it isn't an intermittent resource, the battery helps give the diesels time to ramp up. And that's one of the most critical functions of this storage system, is giving the diesels time to ramp up when the wind drops down. It's a safe buffer, and I saw that happen. Actually, I was lucky to be there in February or March. It's a great time to go up there. The wind was blowing like crazy, and then it dropped, and you could see the battery discharge and give the diesels time to ramp up. The wind produces about 20 to 25%. It's a capacity factor. And basically, because of the contribution of this, it's about 25 to 30% diesel reduction currently, which, is great. I mean, 25 to 30% savings on an annual basis is really good. And
yeah, just to give you a little better picture of that, Brett, the 2 1 million gallon tanks of diesel that I mentioned that the cooperative owns, we used to have to order 1.5 million gallons of diesel annually. We now, with the renewables and the displacement of diesel because of the renewables, we only have to order 1.1 million gallons of diesel. So we have displaced 400,000 gallons of diesel annually, which is great. And the percentage that, Brett, that you quote there is definitely true. And more our renewables run, less diesel we have to burn.
Yeah, making a difference. And for the ratepayers, they haven't, as I understand it, you haven't had to raise the base rate for 8 years, despite all the fluctuations going on in the world, the price changes that we deal with in the lower 48. These guys have been able to keep that base rate stable. And I mean, I just can't, it's just phenomenal that's working as it is.
Our members certainly appreciate that. With the economics like they are in Kotzebue, I remember the Conoco person yesterday quoting a milk statistic, so I'll quote one now for you. In Kotzebue, milk is $10 a gallon. Gas is $8 a gallon. So in terms of having to pay utility rates for electricity, our members are having to deal with extremely high cost of living in every other facet of their life. So anything we can do to stabilize rates, keep rates stable, and even if we move into an area where we can provide more renewables, we may have a chance to even reduce rates. So that's the end goal in all of this, is to provide sustainable, low-cost, reliable energy for all of our members.
Yeah, we're running a little behind, so we'll probably have to move through some of these photos to get to the punchline here. This is some photos of the 900 kilowatt turbine being installed. They had to do it in the winter because it's on permafrost, and in the summer, as some of you know, is extremely difficult to move around on the permafrost. Big cranes, these kinds of projects is what they do TV shows like Engineering Marvels about. Here's a couple pictures of the older, kind of old school batteries. On the right is the nickel cadmium. On the left is the flow battery that froze up, part of the learning process. And this is the modern lithium-ion battery in a modularized container, and that's currently operating really well. I have to use sophisticated ABB controls. This is a SCADA system, which stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. It's hard to see this, but this is the kind of the master control software where you can see all the wind turbines, all the diesels, the PV, the battery, and how it all works together and how it's all controlled and managed. back to sort of the pictures of the challenges working in this environment, big equipment, big tools, big machinery, but when you work with the right partners, they know how to get this stuff done. That's STG's role in this, and they do a great job. You can count on them to solve the problems because things come up. So, next steps, well, currently, KEA, Kotzebue Electric, is targeting the next phase to get to 50% diesel reduction. Yeah, it's happening. This is real. This is super real. Love it. They've ordered parts for the next 2 wind turbines. Again, that provides a strong basis of clean energy generation that they can build off of, with a goal of 4 megawatts of wind generation as the basis. More PV power, that's part of the plan. They've already got diesel on-off that's automated, where I told you about excess wind. Wind and diesels working together in an automated fashion. The plan is to upsize that storage. That's a key piece here, is expanding the battery energy storage. That provides the next dependable basis to continue to remove the diesel consumption. Now, they're starting to integrate electric vehicles. That's going to increase that electrical load. So they've got 1 electric car, they've ordered an electric truck, and they've ordered an electric snowmobile. These electric snowmobiles are made in Canada and Quebec, so they're the real thing. Eventually, boats will get there, and they'll have more electrical load that they got to provide.
It's a snow machine, Brett.
Yeah, right.
The local vernacular is even shorter than that, snow go. And it's important to realize the importance of being able to provide energy at a lower cost for vehicles and for snow goes or snow machines, boats. Those are things, at least the snow machines and the boats, that people use to go out and do subsistence activities. So while in our town, it's not a very big town, you may not have to drive far, being able to have affordable fuel, which if you could convert over to electricity, would be much beneficial towards subsistence activities, which our members depend on quite a bit.
Yeah, at least I didn't call it a ski-doo, right? Isn't that what the Canadians call it? But yeah, and then the beneficial electrification. This is a big piece. The heat. Right now, heating is one of the largest loads in the rural communities. They burn stove oil. Using that electricity, more of these dump load boilers. There's ceramic heaters, which we'll talk about in the next slide, that will use electricity. Part of this electrification. You guys haven't tried to use these ceramic heaters yet, but there's other villages that are experimenting with these ETS ceramic heaters. It's a European technology that can get charged. The ceramic blocks get charged by electrical current, and then you can use a thermostat to release them.
And as you mentioned earlier, we are heating commercial buildings with basically electric boilers now. Not only at the hospital, we're working with the National Park Service. We have plans to work with some of the commercial housing units that we have there, multi-family unit apartment buildings. And we want to continue to drive it down to the consumer, again, providing them with a cheaper way to heat their home. And that is a huge cost. Sometimes your stove oil bill may be equal to your rent or your mortgage every month. And those of us who have to pay those here and be thankful for the lower rates that we have in more urban areas. But our sustainability is really dependent on being able to provide cheaper energy source for our members.
And like we mentioned, the Kotzebue has plans to get to 100% diesels off. And a big part of that is having a stable reliable foundation of the clean energy generation to replace the reliability of the diesels. And with the wind and the solar, they're demonstrating that. One of the next steps, as we mentioned, is continuing to increase the energy storage capacity. So, another important part of that is utilizing what's called a grid forming inverter. Won't get too much into the weeds on that, but diesels currently provide the voltage and frequency on a grid because it's a microgrid, it's an independent network. There are inverters being used now that can set that voltage frequency and be they call it sort of the master of the grid. So that's a big part of that. Increasing the thermal storage for heat to the users, converting all heat to electrical loads. I think really the issue here is capital and financing. Yes. And getting support to get to this goal by 2030.
Yes, and we hope that we will find partners, if not here at this conference and other conversations that we have with people that will be able to help us do that. And I would be remiss without mentioning the person who has been kind of the driving force behind everything that we've done in renewables. He's kind of a guy that likes to stay behind the scenes. I noticed that his email and his phone number are down there on this last slide, but Matt Bergen, if you have additional technical questions about what we've been doing, he is the person to ask. Matt, are you out in the audience? You want to wave your hand? There he is right there. He's always happy to talk to anybody. I know that a lot of people here in the room know Matt, and he's really the person that deserves most of the credit for everything that we've done to this point, along with a lot of the partners that we've worked with. So thank you very much for that. And, if I want to get any message across to the audience here today is that what we've done can be replicated in any remote community. Microgrids are possible. We've had our hiccups along the way, but luckily we've had the support of the community and the board and previous CEOs that have worked with the cooperative. So I would encourage you, if you have questions, feel free to contact myself or Matt or Brett, and we'll be happy to share with you what you may need to do along your journey to get to 100% as well. So this is something we don't do alone. We all work together. So we want to encourage each other and help each other as much as we can. So
thanks, Tom, and thanks, Matt. Thank you, everybody.